Welcome back to the Real Texas Radio Podcast. Thanks for tuning in, and 1,000 welcomes if it's your first time joining. I've got a big show planned. I am going to talk about some updates with the cannabis industry here in Texas. It seems it's always in the news.
Smoke weed every day.
And we're also going to talk about some updates from the Dallas City Council, what happened at the City Council meeting Wednesday, as well as where in the world is Lina Hidalgo, because we didn't see her at the Harris County Commissioner's Court this week either. So before we jump in, please make sure to like, subscribe, follow the Real Texas Radio Podcast from wherever you stream, and follow the show on X at RTR_Bronin, RTR_Bronin. Check out my columns, bronin.substack.com. Let's go ahead and get into it. All right, now, you're listening to the Real Texas Radio Podcast. I'm your host, Bronin, just a fed-up taxpayer bringing you all of your Texas, local, and national news. Okay, before we dive into really local issues in Dallas and Harris County, let's talk about what's going on at the state level. And first thing, cannabis, smokable cannabis in particular, actually is now banned in the state of Texas as of March 31st. I think that was the last day that it can be sold. And I believe the cannabis industry has already filed suit. That's what I'm hearing. They filed suit right on April 1st, I think at 9 a.m. Haven't heard any updates on that as of Thursday, late afternoon. But the curious thing is you can still buy edibles, and I think you can still buy drinkable cannabis. Now, I'm not a weed guy, and I've tried it plenty of times. Most of us have, but it's never resonated with me. I know plenty of people that use the products, but something that I have always heard and experienced myself, those edibles and in the consumable, non-smokable forms, that's what you can really get into trouble with. And it's very hard to gauge the quantity and how much you've had and the delayed onset. So it seems to me like those edibles, they can get you into more trouble than the smokable stuff, but I guess it's really the combustible cannabis or hemp, whatever. They get so many different names for it. I can't keep up.
I don't know how many letters there are now. They really got to stop with that. We know what you mean, Yeah.
I don't know if I always know what they mean, but I'm figuring it out. I've educated myself. And so anyway, we know that Dan Patrick, the lieutenant governor who's running for a fourth term, he is extremely anti-THC, cannabis, hemp, weed, the whole thing, everything, all of it, edible, smokable. He wants it gone, banned. The issue is there are thousands of jobs, if not tens of thousands of jobs, that the cannabis industry creates. And I don't really want to get into a whole, what do I think about it? Should it be banned? What about alcohol? Isn't that even worse just because it's more abundantly available, more widely used? Maybe, probably. You know what? We'll save that for another day. But I bring up Dan Patrick because already the legislative session that will actually begin next year, the beginning of 2027, it's already starting to take shape. Of course, it's an election year, so Dan Patrick and the governor, Greg Abbott, they want to make sure that they're making it really clear to voters what their platform is. Property taxes, property tax relief, allegedly. Again, yeah, we've heard that one before. Still waiting, hasn't happened, not for any normal people anyway. But I bring up Dan Patrick because he's put THC, like I said, that's going to be one of his focus areas apparently. Now, the Senate, the legislature, they had it all wrapped up in a bow and sent to Greg Abbott's desk last year. to ban THC in the state. Now, Greg Abbott, he was pretty quiet on the issue, and then he vetoed the ban. He vetoed the ban, so that was it. And Dan Patrick didn't like that. They definitely split on that issue. So now, the vape shops, which are everywhere, where you can get your weed.
As distinct as the Bogotas of the Bronx?
Yeah, and everywhere else, the Bogotas of Oak Lawn and all over the place. But as of right now, the weed has been mothballed, the combustible stuff. What do you have to say about that, Mayor Whitmire of Houston?
We got 400,000 pounds of marijuana in storage, that the rats are the only ones enjoying it.
Yeah, right now, it's only the rats that can smoke the weed or eat the weed, not the customers. So apparently, some of the lawyers are arguing, I guess it's a legal gray area. A lot of people, they actually get it shipped in the mail from out of state. I know people who do this, and they much prefer it that way. And so now, a lot of those people are thinking, what am I going to do? I don't know. So I think we'll get a resolution soon. Apparently, a similar issue happened a few years ago, and ultimately the cannabis industry won. Or they do just like every other industry does. Remember the BPA in the water bottles? That was a big concern, probably 15 years ago now. And then you go and buy water bottles, and they all would have the tag on it, BPA free, because states were banning this BPA, this element in the plastic. And so what did the manufacturers go out and do? They just made BPA 005 or whatever. And then you can move on and ban that. And they go, okay, how about BPA 0017? So the cannabis industry, they'll just come out with a new strain. They'll figure it out and then force the legislature to have to go and ban that unless the legislature, unless they outsmart them. I don't know. So in the Texas Tribune, again back to Dan Patrick here, I read, Dan Patrick, Mr. Anti-THC, the children, the medical expenses associated with going to the emergency room or the hospital because of THC psychosis, Mr. Anti-Drug, Mr. Good old American boy, Mr. Straight-Lace, Square Check Pants Republican, Dan Patrick. Well, I read in the Texas Tribune, Texas will launch its own clinical trials into, I'm going to mispronounce this for sure, ibogaine psychedelic, after failing to find a drug company to help. The legislature last year approved $50 million to research the psychedelic and find a company to develop it into a drug for FDA approval. So Dan Patrick is behind this ibogaine drug, which I don't even know where it comes from. I've seen that it's an African psychedelic. I've heard of people going to Mexico and doing this, and it's supposed to help you with drug addiction. So here, I'll read a little bit more from the article. For several years, people have silently traveled to clinics in Mexico to take ibogaine. The extract of an ancient African shrub, ibogaine, has been used to alleviate addiction and brain trauma. Ibogaine is an illegal drug that Dan Patrick supports, apparently, but not cannabis, hemp, whatever, that was legal until just a couple days ago by administrative change. But Republicans have championed it due to its positive impact on people suffering from PTSD. Governor Greg Abbott signed Senate Bill 2308 into law last year, creating a consortium of universities, hospitals, and drug developers to conduct clinical trials of an ibogaine drug and get it approved by the FDA for future sale. Lawmakers approved $50 million in taxpayer dollars. Oh, great. Oh, thank you so much. I'm so glad to have my property tax rate going to support that.
First of all, let's get one thing straight. Crack is cheap. I make too much money to ever smoke crack. Let's get that straight, okay? We don't do crack. We don't do that. Crack is whack.
Yeah. So, do we need any more drugs? Does America need any more drugs? Have you looked around the neighborhood and seen the homeless, junkie bum, criminal vagrant, mental patient, ne'er-do-well, recidivist reprobates and thought, wow, those people need to introduce more substances into their life? Has that thought crossed your mind? Is this Ibogaine going to be able to solve homelessness? Because then I might be able to get interested in it. Okay, let's keep it moving. I will talk about Harris County very briefly. And at the most recent Harris County Commissioners Court meeting, Lina Hidalgo, she was absent again. Is anybody shocked? Lina Hidalgo was absent again after her economic development trip to Europe. She went to 3 countries. And she was back from Europe, though. She just decided that she wasn't going to go. They call these the business court meetings. And Tom Ramsey, he wanted to get his resolution passed. At least he was able to read it. Tom Ramsey, he's the only Republican commissioner on the court, even though Lina Hidalgo, she calls the other 2 Latinos who are Democrats part of the GOP 3 because they all hate her so much. But they also don't want to get rid of her because, again, they all look like the founding fathers with the mental patient around. So she's good for business, but I'll play a couple of Tom Ramsey's remarks.
No, it was as presented. Unprecedented removal of Judge Hidalgo's credentials from attending the rodeo. That's never happened. These are hundreds and thousands of volunteers. These are people that are out there trying to make this area better for everyone. And so the sense of entitlement from the judge's chair in that episode out there is just incredible.
And of course, if you are not familiar with the incident, last month, Lina Hidalgo, she got booted out of the Houston Rodeo because she was essentially stealing premium seats, or the dirt or chute seats, whatever they call them, that cost like over $400 a piece. She brought some guests. She didn't have tickets to that area after she attended in the premium seats the previous several nights to the tune of like $9,000. And they booted her. The security, they kicked her out because she didn't have tickets to that area. She had tickets to another area. And it was just a total mental patient breakdown. Every time you think that Lina Hidalgo, Harris County judge, can't get worse, she outdoes herself. And here is Tom Ramsey again. I'll play the cut.
The issue is the rodeo. And the rodeo was insulted. The rodeo was disparaged. And for us not to acknowledge that the rodeo was disparaged and that we need to set the record straight. I don't agree with what she said. I don't agree with what Judge Hidalgo said. Can we at least say we don't agree with what she said about the rodeo?
And no, we can't. Here's Commissioner Ellis.
So, not to belabor the point, I will withdraw my motion assuming.
Yeah, but he wanted to talk about what we can blame. Well, we can blame Donald Trump today if you want to do that.
Everybody's always blaming me for everything.
But no, we don't want to blame the county judge. So she got a pass, but again, they all look like stars with her around. It's like, do you ever watch any reality TV where they have contestants? And I always think to myself, sometimes I'll see some of the contestants or the participants, they'll go after the weak link. And I always think, don't you want to keep the weak link around as long as you can, so there's always somebody to knock off next week and keep you on the show for as long as possible for your own exposure and brand? So obviously the Democrats have all figured that out. I won't spend too much time on the Dallas City Council meeting from Wednesday. It wasn't that exciting. Most of the meeting focused on this initiative that the city manager or the city staff, they're calling Dallas is Home. Dallas is Home.
There is no place like home. There's no place like home.
Dallas is home, and there were 5 different groups that spoke, including National Association of Realtors, I believe they call themselves, the Bush Institute, and of course our very own local homeless grifter association, Housing Forward. So I'll try to break all of this down rather quickly. But the premise is that Dallas has a housing shortage. You've heard this before. You've heard many politicians across Texas, both sides of the aisles, claim that we have a housing shortage. And then Chad West, the bag man, he has been one of the biggest promoters of this farce. And he started out the gate. I've been beating the drum about the housing shortage for years. I've been trying to get my colleagues on the city council to appreciate the housing shortage. And so the first thing I do whenever I hear that there's a housing shortage, which aside from looking out the window and seeing all of the apartments that I'm surrounded by that all have for lease signs in front of them, so I don't even have to venture outside the door, and I can just see the leasable real estate all around me, in addition to brand new apartments, condos, townhomes going up all over my neighborhood. So funny enough, D14 is actually has some of the most available housing stock, I believe. That's what I gleaned from this exercise in futility yesterday that the city council conducted. And one of the groups that the city council, or that was highlighted during the presentations, the groups that need housing the most are our lowest income residents, our lowest income, and they can afford about $700 or $750 a month. This is according to the presenters. $750 a month. And you know what the first thing I thought to myself when I hear that that's the budget? Your budget is $750 a month for housing. That means you cannot live alone. You're going to need to get a roommate, or maybe 2, right? There is no housing in Dallas. I don't think so. I don't think you're going to find a rundown studio apartment, maybe, or a small rundown 1-bedroom apartment. I still doubt it, for $700 per month. That's not how much an apartment costs in Dallas. Maybe you can rent a room. Maybe you and a roommate who have a budget of about $700 a month each can rent a 2-bedroom, maybe even a 2-bedroom, 2-bath for $1,300 or $1,400 per month. That's very feasible. But if your budget is $700 a month, then you can't live alone. And guess what? Developers, they're not building housing stock for that budget because the math doesn't math. Property taxes and HOA fees, and if you have to pay off a bank loan or a mortgage, the math doesn't math building housing stock at that price. And aside from, really one person on the Dallas City Council, pretty much the rest of them they're willing to delude themselves that it is possible to be able to rent single occupant housing at that price point. And so, they call this initiative Dallas is Home, as I mentioned. You know what? They should have added a few more words onto that, City Manager Kim Tolbert. Dallas is home for developers who want tax abatements, because that's really what it sounded like. If we're going to be able to resolve this housing shortage that doesn't exist, and our target demographic for building housing is the lowest of the low income, then we're going to have to just start scrubbing property taxes from these parcels of real estate and just giving out lifetime tax abatements. That's what it sounded like the Dallas City Council was really just reiterating, because the developers, of course, they already know this. And pretty much, I would say 9.9 times out of 10, if not 10 times out of 10, when the developer goes before the city council to get a tax abatement, a lifetime tax abatement, again, one of the city councilors pointed this out, the vote is pretty much 13-2 or 14-1. So that's how it goes. And you know what else? So I got a little bit off track, but I periodically, I go to Zillow.com, which, as you know, is connected to all of the big apartment rental sites like HotPads. I think Zillow owns that, or it's in the same group. And I type in Dallas and I look how many apartments are available for rent. And guess what? The last time I checked, maybe 6 months ago, early 2025, I think there were like 10,000 apartments about a year ago. You know how many apartments there are for rent now? Apartments and houses. All kinds of housing stock, every single council district, studio, 1, 2, 3 bed, whatever you want. Now it's over 15,000. So the availability of rentals has increased by approximately 40 or 50%. And then, because I know that our target group here is the lowest of the low-income earners, so then I filtered for a maximum of $1,400 per month and a minimum of a 2-bedroom apartment. So that way my group, who can only afford $700 each, so that you can get 2 of them, or maybe you could even get 3 if one of the bedrooms is occupied by a couple, though I don't recommend that, though that's none of my business, whatever you got to do to make the numbers work. And there were over 1,500 apartments that met my criteria for the lowest of the lowest income earners. And again, there were options in every single council district in the city of Dallas. So it's just so frustrating when these city councilors, the vast majority of whom, at least 9, including the mayor, they're operating under the assumption now that City Hall it doesn't work anymore, and the inflation, when we looked at how much it was going to cost to repair City Hall 10 years ago or so, it was in the tens of millions, maybe 50 million. Then it shot up to 300 million. Now it's up to $1 billion because of inflation. And there's nothing we can do about it. That's just inflation. That's how it works. Building materials, everything is just so inflated. But then they want you to believe that it's reasonable and feasible for somebody to be able to live on their own for $700 in the city of Dallas, 9th largest city in the United States. So I guess if you're a low-income person, inflation is not supposed to apply to you. And the city, by way of just burdening all the rest of the taxpayers to whom inflation does apply, are just going to subsidize all of the housing for these people, I guess. So homelessness was conflated in this conversation about housing, which, by the way, we don't want low-income housing, by the way. We want attainable housing, which is the same thing as affordable housing. But we don't want gentrification, but we do want market rate. I hope these counselors, they go back and listen to themselves and listen to the discussion that they bring up and realize how foolish they sound and just uninformed on some of these topics. And so then homelessness, anyway, like I said, conflated with this idea. And Housing Forward, the CEO, Sarah Khan, she was there, as she is. She's got to make sure that she's got the spigot opened. And she was talking about making sure that there was just a constant stream of revenue going to the homelessness issue. In other words, her organization, which I think has about 40 people, including her at the top, making a nice salary of 6 figures. And her capacity to spew BS and to spin yarn is unparalleled. I don't know that I've ever seen anybody be able to do it. And here's an example. And a warning, get the vomit bag ready.
Are all parts of the homeless response system, so outreach, shelter, comprehensive services, and housing into one coordinated, sort of results-oriented strategy that's focused on supporting people to regain self-sufficiency and to move out of homelessness. And so Housing Forward does not provide direct service, but we serve as the backbone agency, which means we're bringing partners together around that common strategy. We are aligning and braiding several different funding sources and administering funding to service providers, and we're also establishing shared accountability for results.
Oh boy, that was quite a mouthful of BS. And then Maxie Johnson, council member District 4, so he pointed out, I don't know if he's just noticed this, but he pointed out that we have a bunch of homeless services in my district, the southern sector, and then we get people who are in the medians or living in the bus cabin, or they're on the street, or they're in the sewer or the park, wherever the hell they are, all over the place where they shouldn't be. We get them the services. We move them out. We want them to exit homelessness. And then they just come right back. Here's Maxie Johnson.
And saying that they don't want to go back because there's no sustainability. What can we do to bring sustainability to this situation?
He's asking, again, Sarah Khan, the CEO of Housing Forward, which Dallas just gave them $10 million of taxpayer funds very recently. In addition to, I don't know how much the county, Dallas County, is giving them and Collin County is giving them. I'm not sure. The answer that you're looking for, Maxie Johnson, council member, is Crack Island. When you repeatedly offer a homeless person services and they repeatedly reject them for one reason or another, and they keep just trying to return to the bus cabin, to the median, to the sewer, to the supermarket carriage, to the 7-Eleven doorway, wherever, then you need to get them a one-way ticket to Crack Island. And again, Housing Forward, the CEO, she did a really good job of trying to pretend that your typical homeless person is, that single mother who's raising 3 future valedictorians and she just lost one of her $5 an hour jobs. And the next thing you know, her apartment that she was paying $700 a month for was just taken right from under her. She ended up in eviction court, and now, you know what? Oaklawn, which is full of homeless people, there's not any single mothers with raising valedictorians. The people who I see in my neighborhood in D14, the reason why you can't put them in the house is for the same reason that you can't put a goat in a house. You're going to get the same result, except if you put the goat in the house and you check on them in 3 months, the house is going to be in better shape with the goat than it is with the typical homeless, junkie, bum, criminal, vagrant, mental patient, ne'er-do-well, recidivist, reprobate who you might want to offer that house to. Except the goat probably won't be able to set the house on fire like the homeless person would be able to do. So that would be the only thing that might be different. They're not going into housing, those people. They need to go to Crack Island. And they can bring their own housing. They can bring their cardboard box and their tent and the supermarket carriage they stole with blankets and all that crap. But the housing is not compatible with them. Certainly not in a city. Certainly not next to any normal person who is paying for their housing. That's not going to work. We've tried it many times. Many states have tried it. It doesn't work. It fails. It's dangerous. They don't belong in a house. Okay, well, this is probably a good place to wrap it up. I know I've been harping on the bums a lot lately. We got a lot around.
We have a lot of mentally insane killers. I mean, you can't even talk to them. It'd be nice if you could have a little reason, but you can't even reason. These are seriously ill people.
I know. President Trump, I wish you would get on it. I wish you'd open Crack Island. Save us all, please, because the Democrats, they want us to live among these people. All right, I'm Bronin. Thank you for tuning in once again to the Real Texas Radio Podcast. Keep tuning in. Keep listening. If you haven't checked out my columns on Substack, substack.bronin, I wrote a column on 37 signs you might be a perfect fit for Crack Island. So check that out, and I will catch you on the next episode.